Boston cop shoves videographer back while threatening to arrest him for battery on a police officer. A hefty plainclothes sergeant from the Boston Police Department figured the best way to not be exposed on camera was to physically confront a videographer, shoving him with his belly and pushing him back while threatening to arrest him for felony assault on an officer. Says you touch me again and I will lock you up for assault and battery on a police officer, the burly sergeant told the videographer. He says this, of course, is another common practice used by police, ranking right up there with ordering a non-resistant suspect to stop resisting while physically pummeling him. And it has nothing to do with interfering with a police investigation or police doing this duty. It has to do with their being held accountable. They want to be called. They like to play this stupid game about serving the public. Yet, when the public wants to put eyes on them and hold them accountable for their actions, then they don't like it. Then they turn into bullies. That's what this movie is kind of about. The Place Beyond the Pines from 2012 with Ryan Gosling. It's a pretty good movie. You should check it out. Texas deputy accused of raping mother in front of her children resigns. So a deputy in Texas accused of raping a woman in front of her children has resigned, according to the Channel 11 News. It says here, they told local media outlets earlier this week that the deputy came over to her home to question her about harassing phone calls. During the questioning, the deputy allegedly sexually assaulted her in her own home. So it says here, note, Raw Story does not usually publish the name of the sex victims, but Rodriguez said she wanted her name and story to be public. So I guess the revenue collector told her they should talk in the bedroom upstairs, then grabbed her and basically said that if she resisted, he would take her to jail. Next up, we have deputy files civil lawsuit against a 9/11 caller after he was injured during the assault at her home. So again, this is all the cops here, all blacked out. If there's something you would probably at least expect after calling 9/11 emergency, it would be a lawsuit. If a deputy was hurt, would you be financially responsible? So never mind when they hurt you, they're hardly ever accountable. Actually, they're not, they hardly ever are financially responsible. It's the taxpayers, it's the, quote, public that actually pays for their irresponsibility. A deputy is now suing a woman who called for help during an emergency. It all stems from a deputy-involved shooting that happened last year. Deputy says when he was injured when she made the call from her subdivision, the lawsuit claims that the homeowner failed to adequately warn 9/11 of the dangerous situation he was walking into. Okay, talking about double standards, these are the same people that say they put their lives on the line and risk their lives to protect the public, to serve them. Then we have Indiana police threatened to taser a black firefighter in the face for waving at them. Police department in Indiana has launched an internal investigation after a firefighter said he was thrown to the ground and threatened with a taser for waving at several officers who thought he was flipping them off. See, these people think they're gods, dude. Filed a formal complaint over the incident that happened on Tuesday. He also serves as a youth pastor at the Memorial Baptist Church. Said he was riding his bicycle on South Weinbeck Avenue when he waved at several officers in the patrol car. The next thing he knew, the officers had pulled him over. The officer jumped out and says, "What are you doing throwing your hands up at us?" He is talking to me as he is coming towards me. I tried to explain, but I couldn't get a word in edgewise. He said he knew the Evansville police chief from community events, so he busted out his cell phone to help calm the situation. But the officer told him to put the phone down. When he hesitated, the taser came out. So it was literally maybe inches from my face. Says I immediately threw my hands in the air. When he asked me to do so, I was more than willing to do so. I said, "Please don't hurt me." The next thing I know, I'm laying down on the ground. They cuffed me. I remember looking down at the barrel of the taser because the officer was gritting his teeth and saying, "Don't make me pull the trigger." Lastly, after the officers asked him where he worked, their attitudes changed, they said. My website is Global Government News. The address is ggnonline.net, not .com anymore. And on YouTube, my channels are DDarko 2012 and DDarko 2013. So, moving on here, we have Mayor Bloomberg loves cameras watching everyone except for his cops. Again, double standards. Lawmakers issued license plates that make them invisible to traffic cams and parking tickets. So, Well, consumers points out how politicians, yet again, are being allowed to ignore the same laws that affect their constituents. Colorado lawmakers are immune from speeding tickets and parking tickets thanks to special plates issued to lawmakers, ones that aren't included in the DMV base. We just covered this recently from August 6th, and one of the directives ordered by the judge in her decision declaring New York City's stop and frisk program unconstitutional was to equip NYPD officers with body cameras. Mayor Bloomberg treated the suggestion derisively during the post-decision press conference. He sarcastically channeled the common man's complaints about cop-operated cameras. A camera on the lapel or hat of an officer. He didn't turn the right way. My God, he deliberately did it. It's a solution that's not a solution. So for a guy who really seems to love aiming cameras at civilians, Bloomberg sure isn't much for aiming it at his own personal army. The thing is, evidence shows that body cameras are a net gain for both cops and civilians. When cops in California were forced to wear cameras, their use of force dropped by 2/3. Then next up we have guy tweets pot requests. Cops tweet him back, awesome, can we come too? So, just a real dumbass, but it just goes to show you how cops are paying attention. A worker at an auto shop in Toronto has lost his job after tweeting for pot to be brought to his workplace. Firing also became clear through Twitter, where he announced it to a friend. A coworker wouldn't say whether the firing was directly related to his less-than-smooth transaction. He says here that his take on the matter, I've lost complete hope in society. There's killers, rapists, people missing, and all they care about is a dude asking for weed. Former narcotics officer, we terrorize families over a bag of pot. Former Texas narcotics officer recently sat down with the Huffington Post to explain why he turned against the drug war. A couple of times I raided a home and there was 2 kids in the home scared. We terrorized the family, and it's for a bag of pot, he said. Searching the house, I noticed the kids had straight A report cards. The parents' checkbook was balanced, and I realized that something was amiss. Something was really bad. I put it together years later after I started smoking pot, he confessed. You know, a lot of people report that the use of medication helps a person self-reflect. And he says, the veil came off and I started doing the real research for myself instead of believing the propaganda, and I cried for a year after I found out the truth and what I've been involved in. After abandoning law enforcement career, Cooper produced the documentary Never Get Busted, which explains how to hide marijuana from police. Helicopter crew looking for pot gardens crashes in Oregon. Helicopter crew looking for illegal marijuana gardens crashed on a Forest Service road in eastern Oregon on Monday afternoon. Says that in fact a smoke jumper fighting a wildfire found a pot garden belonging to Mexican drug traffickers earlier this year. See, that's the interesting part though, right? If Mexico and the U.S. legalized it, then you wouldn't have these drug cartels. So, but it says here on Monday around 1:30, the helicopter was 400 feet off the ground when the engine failed, causing the pilot to auto-rotate down to a narrow road. More Fast and Furious guns surface at crimes in Mexico. 3 more weapons from Fast and Furious have turned up at crime scenes in Mexico, CBS has learned. Ever since they purchased 700 guns, the steady stream of guns have been recovered at crime scenes in Mexico, and the U.S. Justice Department has refused repeated requests from Congress to provide full accounting. The U.S. Army conducts military occupation drill in small town Wisconsin. Once there, they began conducting a realistic training exercise. Other soldiers assigned to the headquarters element remain behind the unit's location. Although the population of Gillette is only 1,300, the city offers services that one would find in larger cities. Well, that sounds nice, services, huh? Yeah, see, and this is how the news covers it, right? Small town provides big training value. Here we have AK rifle magazines being purchased by the Army. So they're going to buy these about 500,000 of these 30-round capacity AK rifle magazines. Concord City Council delays decision on Bearcat grant. So after more than 150 protesters came to the City Council's chambers last night, the council delayed a decision on acquiring an armored Bearcat vehicle. They basically tabled a vote on accepting a $260,000 federal grant to purchase the Bearcat after 2 hours of public testimony on the issue. It said the council will consider the item again next month. The counselor said here, it requires much more debate than we have time for tonight. In other words, we lost, so let's just push it off till next month to see if we can slide it past the civilians again. On that, more background, Concord City wants a tank to use against occupiers and libertarians. They listed nonviolent groups as domestic terror threats in the federal grant application. They said they're fortunate that they have not been victimized by mass casualties involving international terrorism strikes. He says the threat is real and here. Groups such as the Sovereign Citizens, Free Staters, and Occupy New Hampshire and active and present daily challenges. He goes on here, and the police chief says now that he doesn't actually believe the Free State Project or Occupy New Hampshire are domestic terror threats. I wish I would have worded things differently in retrospect. No, he doesn't. He just wanted to get a big, bad piece of machinist Bearcat. There's a lot of control opposition groups, but as far as Sovereign Citizens and Free Staters, I don't think it's libertarians. The InfoWarriors like to put it like that, like to come in for their guns. The biggest problem for the state is anarchists. There's basically no state. And sovereigns, people who try to navigate themselves through the legal infrastructure that's set up. And I know people have philosophical and political differences with me, and I understand that. But I'm just trying to put it out there that you're going to be used for, like Alex Jones and them. They're trying to create a 10%, engineer a 10% to create a revolution whenever they decide to do that, and they'll create a new government, and by these individuals. But they still believe in government. They still believe in the order, whether they know it or not. So, car dealership in Las Vegas becomes unmarked military base. We've already covered this before, but car dealership in Las Vegas has been transformed into a military base that seems to be fully stocked with combat vehicles. Armed TSA teams now roam in public and conduct suspicious searches on demand. That police state you were warned of has already arrived. It says Americans' illusion of freedom are becoming more and more transparent. With the federal government's now standard practice of deploying armed agents to actively roam public venues and conducting these searches on anyone they want. The goal of these checkpoints, these Viper checkpoints the TSA runs, is to dominate, intimidate, and control. Maine doctor calls Department of Health and Human Services on mother for feeding fresh goat milk to her baby. So she receives aid from the WIC program, and she only had a certain way to do it because she didn't produce enough milk, and then she didn't want to go with the stuff with the regular formula and that. She says here that when the doctor found out that she was giving this homemade formula to Karsten, she reported it to the Department of Health and Human Services, which sent staff members to the house. She didn't say where she was from, and she rudely asked to enter their house, demanding that their kid go to the hospital to be evaluated, and threatened if she refused that they would take their kid from her and put it in a foster care. Top security expert says treating everyone like a potential terrorist weakens our ability to protect America. He says here that having this mass surveillance database makes it like a needle in a haystack, too big to search meaningfully for bad guys. I just mentioned this on Wednesday, right? When it may actually change because they have so much information on everybody that could actually be hacked and used against them. The whole whistleblower thing, whether it's real or not, it's the human element. And they don't want people talking about their crimes, bringing them to light. So this individual details how the government should roll back the military mission creep of domestic policing, reversing the U.S. military's policing. In America, SWAT teams are deployed about 100 to 150 times per day and about 50,000 times per year, dramatic increase from the 3,000 or so in the early 1980s. One way is basically ending the war on drugs by decriminalizing it, but also the surplus military equipment surplus program, and also you have basically the federal government that's creating all these incentives for local police departments to get armed like the Marines. How I Managed My Slaves by Alexander Warbuck, 1978. Slaves need electricity so they can stay up later to work and study to be able to pay the electric bills and pay for all the fine labor-saving machines which enable them to finish their work in time to get some recreation, which will help them feel more like going back to their jobs to earn money to live their wonderful lives as slaves. Talking about being able to buy all those things. If they didn't buy these fine things, they would have no reason to work for money. Those who make their own stuff are self-sustainable deprive themselves of the need to work for money. Consumption can be increased by making welfare and government grant money more available. More people provide for their own needs and direct their own lives. It leaves less people to control them. It's necessary to keep them dependent on jobs or government money to maintain our control. We must keep them from dropping out of our schools, which teach them to obey orders, respect our laws, love their country, and coincidentally we teach them a trade or profession which they will minister to our needs and whims or to the needs of other servants. Those who take care of their own needs are difficult to enslave, so we must encourage people to become dependent in every area that is possible to do so. New York has a truancy task force protecting the youth. Schools are trying to find an alternative to suspension to keep kids from dropping. Mr. T, don't be a fool, stay in school. Isn't it funny how the technocrats and millionaires and even royalty have actually dropped out of school? That's why they're sterilizing the sick and poor to cut welfare costs. Bloomberg says the city should fingerprint public housing residents for their own. The government's already been RFID tracking homeless people.